Tony and Elizabeth Jordan appear to have a stable, successful life. They live in a beautiful home, both have strong careers, and they are raising a young daughter named Danielle. On the surface, everything looks fine. But inside their home, tension quietly fills every room. Tony is short-tempered and controlling. When things don't go his way, his frustration turns into anger. Elizabeth feels emotionally worn down, constantly trying to avoid conflict while still holding the family together. Their conversations feel more like negotiations than expressions of love. Danielle notices the distance between her parents even when they try to hide it. She watches arguments unfold, senses the silence afterward, and feels the emotional weight without fully understanding it. The family isn't falling apart loudly, it's falling apart slowly, through neglect, pride, and unresolved resentment. Elizabeth meets an elderly woman named Miss Clara while working on a real estate deal. Miss Clara is calm, observant, and surprisingly direct. Instead of focusing on the house, she focuses on Elizabeth. She notices her stress, her exhaustion, and the heaviness she carries. Miss Clara gently challenges Elizabeth, telling her that the real battle isn't with her husband. It's happening beneath the surface. She explains that many people fight the wrong way, arguing, reacting, and trying to force change instead of preparing themselves spiritually and emotionally. Elizabeth is confused by the conversation but deeply affected by it. Miss Clara introduces the idea that battles in marriage and life are not always visible, and that true strength begins with intentional preparation rather than confrontation. Miss Clara explains the concept of spiritual strategy. She believes prayer is not passive or weak, but focused and disciplined. She talks about having a dedicated space to pray, a war room where distractions are removed and intentions are clear. Elizabeth struggles with this idea. She is practical and logical, and prayer feels uncertain compared to direct action. Still, Miss Clara insists that lasting change doesn't start with controlling others, but with changing how you respond. Elizabeth leaves the meeting unsettled but thoughtful. For the first time, she considers that the way she has been fighting might be contributing to the problem rather than solving it. Elizabeth decides to act on Miss Clara's advice. She clears out a small closet in her home and begins turning it into a prayer space. At first, it feels awkward and unfamiliar. She doesn't know what to say or how to pray with intention. Slowly, the space becomes meaningful. She writes down prayers, pins reminders, and reflects on her own behavior. Instead of asking for her husband to change, she begins asking for wisdom, patience, and clarity. This isn't a visible change in the marriage yet, but it is a major internal shift. Elizabeth stops reacting emotionally and starts responding intentionally. While Elizabeth commits to prayer at home, Tony faces temptation elsewhere. At a business dinner, another woman flirts openly with him. His ego is fed, and the situation escalates quickly. At the same time, Elizabeth is praying for protection over her family. Suddenly, Tony becomes violently ill at the restaurant. The moment is interrupted, and the decision he was about to make is cut short. Tony sees it as bad timing, not intervention. But the parallel between Elizabeth's prayers and Tony's interruption cannot be ignored. Tony's professional life begins to unravel. His unethical choices at work come back to haunt him. Authority slips away, and the control he relies on begins to disappear. At home, Elizabeth remains calm. She doesn't argue, accuse, or demand explanations. Her composure confuses Tony more than confrontation ever did. The power dynamic begins to shift, not through force, but through restraint. Danielle notices the change first. The house feels different. The tension isn't gone, but it's no longer explosive. Elizabeth continues praying consistently, treating the war room as a place of preparation rather than escape. She focuses on forgiveness, humility, and patience. Tony, meanwhile, begins to feel the weight of his actions. Without his usual authority at work, he's forced to reflect. Pride weakens, defensiveness fades. The family atmosphere softens. Conversations become less hostile. Silence feels less threatening. Tony starts questioning himself rather than blaming others. Elizabeth continues to stand firm in her new approach, trusting the process instead of rushing the outcome.